Oh, there we go. That's clear now.
No, yeah, we're going live. Zach may or may not be with us.
I'm here, just have no camera.
He's having technical difficulties because he decided to wait until the last minute to get into the chat here. So that's what
I have
happens.
lots of good excuses.
That's what happens when the talent doesn't have the limo sent for them at the right time. But anyway, I digress. Welcome, everyone, to Goddammit, Zach. This episode, we're going to talk miniatures and art and painting miniatures because I just found out that John Popson from Effin' Cool Miniatures is an excellent miniature painter.
Really?
And Alyssa Fadden is breaking into actually making miniatures out of green stuff thanks to an experiment from Lucid Eye Games.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
With that.
Yep.
He's come out swinging.
That's too soon, man.
The shot across the bow right there. John, why don't you start? Tell us a little bit about Effin' Cool Miniatures. Since this is your first time on the show, we're gonna strip you naked and parade you out in front of both of our viewers.
I thought it was Jack. Sorry.
Could be.
I was promised Jack for that, but anyway.
Jack being naked?
In general, yeah, whatever.
Okay.
Just a
I don't know what to. I never know what to say in these kind of things, man. We're just a small little company.
When did you start the company? When did you start Effin' Cool Miniatures?
5 years ago. 5 years ago.
Wow.
Just kind of, we had a game store, and I had always had miniatures and crap laying around, and at some point, the kids in the shop were playing Warhammer. Okay. And I actually missed the whole Warhammer thing. I never played it. So I started watching them play 40K. I had a ton of 40K miniatures from the early 90s. And at some point I wanted to play. And so I toted out all my old miniatures, and I had these little dwarf guys, and they're called squats. And by the time I was trying to learn the game, they're an army that doesn't exist. So they produced them for, apparently the term squat is a derogatory term for a little person. So they kind of.
Oh, I know a few of those, but can't say who they are.
I could ask my wife.
Well, ooh, that was the first one I was thinking of too.
Yep.
Ooh.
Long story short, I started getting fascinated. Well, okay, how do they actually make miniatures? I had no idea. Well, it turns out I start watching it. I worked in a factory in the 90s for a summer making door handles for cars by casting zinc in spin cast molds. Okay. I start looking into how they're making miniatures. I'm like, well, that's the same shit I already know how to do.
Same thing.
Right. And so
you have a miniature horse named Bill.
I do have a miniature horse named Bill.
It's awesome.
I would not have a miniature horse named Bill.
I know.
But long story short, had no money for equipment, and I've got a inventive spirit. So sat down and thought, well, what does it take? I don't have 12 grand laying around to throw at this thing that I don't even know if I want to do. So
come on, man.
I built a spin caster out of a washing machine. So I took a washing machine, cut it all apart, flipped it on its back, literally would hand clamp the molds down with wing nuts, turn that thing on spin cycle, and
that
and wait for it to start spinning.
That is fantastic.
That is metal. That is totally metal in many ways.
Making molds. I bought a mold frame, which is it's the case that you actually build your mold in before you vulcanize it. And I just closed it with C-clamps, and I bought this cheapo oven that I stuck in the paint room here in my shop. And I would just bake these things in there with them clamped with C-clamps, with giant C-clamps that would break and destroy and fall apart inside them. They're not designed for that much heat, that much pressure. So long story short is that little by little, I just started getting real equipment. I'm like, well, I bought a used spin caster from the East Coast and had it shipped here. That was like $3 grand. I thought, I'm sick of casting on the washing machine. This is really tedious.
I'm
It
so
only-
impressed. I'm so impressed. So I went to Valiant and took a tour,
Mhm.
and I was like, "This is really hard." And you did it with a washing machine. You sir,
Well, some of those miniatures.
you are somebody worth respect.
Well, what I did when I first did it, though, I was, and I admit it, I don't really care. I didn't really think about like IP theft at the time. I did it because I wanted to make copies of the squat miniatures that I had because I went on to eBay to buy them, and they're like $40 a piece.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is bullshit. I can't play this game with the 8 miniatures I've got. So I cobbled all this stuff together. My first molds were all Games Workshop miniatures that I just made copies for myself with. And then, like, at some point, I just didn't really think about it. I opened an eBay store and started selling copies. I didn't really think about, like,
Allegedly started selling copies.
No, I actually did
allegedly.
it.
You're the guy at the van at the conventions that you open it up and all this like
He's got a
orcs
spin
come out.
caster in his van. He can just
Right.
open the back doors.
He's 3D printing miniatures
There's
in
a fucking
case.
washing machine in the van.
It just happened, though, that at one day it just hit me. I went, you know what? This is completely illegal, and somebody's going to tell me to stop. And I probably should figure out how people actually make miniatures for real. And at that time, Form Labs was running their Kickstarter for the first Form 1, the first desktop SLA resin-based printer that would have resolution good enough to make miniatures with. I didn't know how to sculpt at that point. I just like, well, if I'm going to do this, I guess this is what I have to do. And I backed that Kickstarter. And in the meantime, I had paid a bunch of sculptors that I had met to make greens for me. So I've got a mishmash of traditionally sculpted and digitally sculpted stuff in our web store. So I don't know. That's the long and short of it. Never looked
I'm just
back.
impressed that you did something like that. I just would have copied the Game Workshop stuff and then stopped. That's so impressive.
You know what? I just got really bit by the bug because I always liked miniatures. It really hit me once I realized, the name of the business became the name of the business. So I own a restaurant. And after that winter of fucking around making miniatures, my loyal local customers that come in every season that I don't see all winter would be like, oh, well, what'd you do all winter? So I'm showing them these little minis. Oh, dude, I built a machine to make these little metal miniatures. And every single one of these people were like, man, that's fucking cool.
Alyssa, were you impressed?
So
I own most of his miniatures.
she's got a copy of just.
So he makes the one of the woman next to the pillar?
I hope he does, because it might actually be a good miniature if he actually made it.
I'm just kidding. No.
Well, there's been a bunch of discussion amongst me and 2 other companies that I talk with regarding that miniature. And I still think I'm right, but my buddy,
I agree with you.
Figures says, I don't think that's what happened. But I'd love to see the original greens of that to see if they actually fit together properly, or if it was distorted in the mold under heat and pressure. If that green was just too thin and it flattened her out, which is possible.
It's when I learned that many things could go wrong after you sculpted it that I knew that was never going to be for me.
Yeah,
I've been so excited. I have a guy with an axe. I'm so excited. Let me put him in and he comes back out and he's that lady on the next to the pillar.
Well, like every time I see John at a convention and he's got like a corner booth or something, so it's really easy, just walk up, you see this whole rack of all these different miniatures, and I know he's caught me doing this more than once. I'll get over to the booth and like there's a separation or a difference in the carpet for where the booth is from where you walk around, and like I get one toe right on the edge and I'm looking at everything, because if I step in, I'm doomed. I'm just taking one of each because I can't make a choice, and then I'm just like, do I do it? Should I get him?
Yes.
Wait, I have to wait. And then and then he's normally helping somebody. He'll look up and look at me, and I look back at him, and I'm just like, and then I'll run away like a child.
That sounds like the first time you met Earl Otis. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is kind of what I do to everybody. But anyway, so what's your latest, John? What's the latest set you have? I know you did the whole Kickstarter for the Court of the Sultana.
Right.
and it
That
came
was
out just amazing.
that was 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago.
I'm old.
Well, that's all right. Things on the horizon. Court of the Sultana Part 2. I mean, I've got a bunch of things done for that. I just haven't
Sweet.
figured out the market's really weird right now. We have this, with the advent of home 3D printing, it really has made it kind of like you have to really make decisions on what's going to be the cash maker that's going to keep me alive,
Right.
Last summer I spent a bunch of time putting together a Patreon specifically for Court of the Sultana that I've never gone live with it because I'm like, I don't have enough time to sculpt X many pieces a month for it. I don't think I can meet the commitment with all the other shit I do.
I can't either. So I'm with you.
Yeah. I mean, so the next thing we've actually got coming up, we just re-upped our contract with Cobalt Press. Our new contract allows us to sell STLs also, which
wow.
was absent from our previous contract. So we're in this weird flux point right now while we're waiting for this plastic injection machine to get here. Okay. Because I don't want to be like, well, this next Kickstarter we're going to do, these are going to be in metal, plastic, and STL. And I get the machine here and I have some horrific catastrophic problem that I can't deal with the machine. I don't want to, overpromise and have it take another year. I can't sit out a year with this machine. This thing will break my back if I don't get it working right away.
Yeah, you use the washing machine. You got plastic injection machine now. I would say that's a Horatio Alger story, man. That is straight from. That's from. I like Goblin miniatures too. Mankind. I own every Goblin miniature in America. That's impressive.
Well, we did the same thing with the printers though. Like it's weird. It's weird to explain to somebody who has a really good home 3D printer. They're really good right now. Okay. I have 3 Frozen Sonic 4K minis. They're really good printers. Okay. Like $240 a piece, but they don't come anywhere near my $42,000 printer. Okay. Yeah. Now explaining the difference to somebody why you would need a $40,000 printer versus, well, this thing does it just as good. Well, no, it doesn't. Not when you're selling reproduced miniatures. If I sold you a reproduced miniature that you could see the strata lines on, the build lines on it, you'd be like, this is bullshit. Okay. But if you printed it yourself, you'd be like, look at this cool thing I made, Yeah,
because you feel like you're totally talented. I get it. That's what I did.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with it. I think it's great, but it's really forced my hand on a bunch of things. The plastic injection thing. If we're going to keep doing Cobalt Press, that fan base, or like most tabletop role-playing game guys and gals, in the modern 5e era, are used to WizKids, Gale Force 9, Reaper.
Right.
They're used to plastic. They just are not as interested in metal.
Well, the first Reaper Kickstarter, I thought we were all going to bury ourselves like Vikings under that before they melted it on top of us. Because it was so much. We were not used to literal, it was coming at you like a tidal wave. And when it showed my house, I don't even paint miniatures, but I was excited anyway. I don't even know where to begin.
That's what 20 years of sculpt sitting around and just now we're going to do them all in plastic. It was insane.
No,
that happened. That first Kickstarter ran right as I was starting to build the Spincaster.
I was just doing my Whisper and Venom when I had like 12 miniatures, and that was the end of my entire miniature run. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh my God, I am in the wrong one.
I have those minis, by the way.
Oh, mine?
I have your Whisper and Venom.
No, great. They're okay. I did the okayest minis I've ever made.
No, actually, you did some really, really nice stuff. You had Mark Evans do some stuff for you.
Mark Evans do the goblins, and I had a bunch of people.
Yeah. So I think that's how I met Mark, actually, was because I had seen he had worked on your project, and I just cold called him and was like, look, I like what you did. He's another case, though.
I have an artistic question for our guests this evening, Alyssa and John. You both, in different aspects, are pretty well known for miniatures. John, obviously, from the store. Alyssa, from Enfilade and everything that you do with Romans and your whole Facebook feed and all this stuff. Does your love of miniatures come from a wargaming side, or is it just the artistic nature of having these little tiny figures, or is it from role playing? And Alyssa, I'll have you go first on that one.
I kind of want to say all of the above. I mean, while the first miniatures I ever handled were wargaming ones, and they weren't mine, they were friends at school. Probably a whole bunch of Napoleonics, minifigs, probably.
Yeah.
Which it's great, when you've got a whole unit of them together, there's something incredibly sexy about it. But I never picked up a minifig miniature and went, oh, he is so awesome. It was always about the units and things like that.
Right.
And for me, the first time that I really, I think, got into miniatures, it was through role playing. First time I ever bought the box set, blue and red boxes, and in the same store. And it was a toy store, so they don't even know what they're selling. They've got this little turnstile, and there's maybe 12 miniatures on there in total. And I buy myself a simplistic Minotaur and a knight and a skeleton. That was it. But I loved them. I still own them to this day. And that's awesome. That's when I freaking fell in love with miniatures. It was like, I love the little skeleton with the sword above his head, and the knight. I think everyone owned it in the world, where he's got a shield next to him. It's basically a chunk of metal. He's got a shield next to him. He's got a sword holding up this way. There's no undercuts. It's impossible because he's just a block. And the Minotaur holding the axe up to one side. Unfortunately, the axe is now broken. But I mean, I fell in love with those things, and that's why I could not stop buying miniatures from that point on.
You told us to kick that habit 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, nowadays I don't buy miniatures anymore. No,
Jack owes me a Coke.
I bought everything that almost every cool miniatures have ever done, including the ones behind me in the picture here, including his previous Kickstarters.
The Sultana ones are great.
I bought the Sultan one. Of course, I bought the Sultan. I bought the Cultist one. And I want to know what's in the next Sultan one. But yeah, I mean, I just love miniatures. I've got too many miniatures at this point, and I still keep buying them because I just like looking at them.
Yeah, it's like crack.
No, it is.
And I mean, I don't have a camera that's set up, but there's just walls of this shit all over the place.
I have so many that I have people paint mine for the first Reaper Bones, the bigger ones. I don't know where to put them. I just stack them on top of my wife's bookshelf when she's not looking, so I can get them out of the case. and I love them so much.
I mean, I know that the world is moving towards plastic, and I get it. And this is not even me being curmudgeon-y, but I like the weight of metal, or even if it's a larger piece, a good resin cast is okay for me. But because that point, it starts to transcend into something I do want to paint, and I do want to put it on a shelf. It's less about just throwing plastic around on the table for me. In fact, it's got nothing to do with it. I want something I can look at and my little heart goes flutter, flutter, flutter. And part of that is the artistic aspect of it nowadays.
John, what about you?
How's your heart go flutter?
Well, as with every question, I've always got a long answer. So,
good.
Like I said earlier, I started playing D&D in '79. Okay, but my best friend's older brother played. None of those guys, they're like 5 years older than us, but none of them had miniatures. I think they were Holmes box. I think they were playing Holmes, and we got to play along. We were really young. I was 8, I think. So, we got to play, but we weren't really playing our own games. And then in about 80, one of the guys in our group got the Monster Manual.
Ooh.
And then when I think the red Moldvay box came out, I think that's when we really.
That was my crack. My crack.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I still have it sitting behind me, but
I do too.
You have like 10 copies, though, Zach, of everything. So,
well,
but
that's because I don't buy miniatures. I can afford to buy all this stuff without those. Anyway.
Well, the thing is that back then, for at least in the town that I grew up in, which is the town I currently still live in, but that was a way to make new friends. As D&D was becoming popular, there were different isolated groups of gaming people. Okay, and so we all didn't play together, but it would be, oh, well, I'm playing in Don's group. And then I meet this kid, Chandler. Okay. Chandler says, well, come over to my house. All right. So one day after school, and this is third grade, okay, third or fourth grade, one or the other, but I go over to Chandler's house and he's got a brother that's in college and they're way into Dungeons and Dragons. And they have boxes and boxes and boxes of miniatures set up on this table, just tons and tons of miniatures everywhere you can look. And I just, whoa.
Were they painted?
Yeah, it was all painted and everything. And so
were they painted multiple colors?
Yeah,
I've got a bunch of shitty old lead miniatures that are like all one color.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, that.
This is when you lick them off first. Then if you lick it off, the paint's cut off fast.
Yeah, that monster's red.
The part of the story that gets weird is that being a poor kid, growing up with no money, stealing shit wasn't outside of my realm, even in fourth grade, and so I snatched a little fighter and a little wizard.
You were lucky.
Is this the second crime that John's admitted to?
I'm
today.
Totally criminal mastermind.
At least.
I got 5 on my bingo card today for him. So,
well,
You got what? How much you got coming? 3?
I got a phone call later that night from Chandler.
I thought you were going to say you got a phone call from the cops.
No,
I thought God was calling, asking you to rethink yourself. Huh?
Just return the miniatures, and we won't be mad about it. And I'm like, what miniatures? I didn't take your miniatures.
Oh,
he's like,
great.
He's like, you took 2 miniatures that we were using tonight. Well, I got you. And I'm like, out of the whole room of shit I could have taken, I took 2 things they were gonna need that night.
Oh man!
So
you should have multi-class thief, man. That's your problem.
Yeah, well, that's basically the start of miniatures for me. At that point, they became an integral part of play. The Grenadier sets, the yellow boxes, the Royal Partha blisters from, you name it. Anywhere I could find them, I would buy them. So I have a huge pile of lead, most of which has been at least primed to protect it. It's not painted, most of it, and I probably never will paint it, but I still have it.
Send it to Alyssa.
That's the only kind I have, and I'm afraid if it's sent to her, it'd be
send me miniatures, guys. I've got no problem with that. Might take me a long time to paint them.
Not send you substandard ones. I can't guarantee these are good shape. There's no way I'm sending you awesome miniatures and you open up, it's dust.
Did you say you're not going to paint them? Just send them. You're not.
Just take a long time, John.
Yeah.
Just take a long time. But one of the most moving miniature experiences for me, to expound upon what John's saying there, is there used to be this store in Liverpool, England. It's long since closed. So I go from this toy shop of teddy bears and Lord knows what, and they got a single rack of miniatures going. And I take a train with a connection to Liverpool with friends. And there was this hobby store with a basement. Of course, I had a freaking basement. And you'd go downstairs and the walls were lined with glass cabinets with individual components on them. Mm. And there was a miniature behind every single one with a little code. And you'd write down your code and you'd take your list to the guy at the front desk and he would pull out these drawers of miniatures and he would hand you what you were buying.
That is the most British thing I've heard in a long time.
It was
I bet.
Sublime. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I spent so much money there. I went back there so many times. And that was the first time I ever saw, and John, you're going to know, Citadel. I think the Citadel did a range of dragons at one point. Might have been Citadel. And there was this, they did the at the time, the largest dragon in the world. It's about so big.
It's huge.
And I ended up actually owning that piece. But at the time, as a little girl, I was just like, oh, it's so beautiful. Best store I've ever been in. And yeah, very British.
That is so funny, picturing Alyssa as this little girl doing this and not, Little Red Riding Hood with the butcher knife, just walking the streets of London.
That's the Larry Elmore slave girl collection. All right.
If I'd had John as a friend, then John would have shanked someone and I would have got the dragon. So it would have been fine. But
we could have had that dragon.
So since Alyssa can talk one side of this question and John can talk to the other side, what is the crack addictive nature of miniatures? I mean, you guys have both mentioned it. Like the first time you saw it, it was just like, what is it about miniatures that get people so much?
John, you go first.
I think it's a couple of things. I think it depends on the person is the problem. Okay. So for me, what it was actually seeing a physical representation of something that could be a character that I was playing in a game. Oh, this is my fighter. I think that was the initial thing for me. But I think for other people, you've got hobbyists that are mostly painters. Okay. When they look at a miniature, what grabs them is, ooh, I want to paint that. This has got the right level of detail for me to make something really pretty out of it. All right. You also have people that like the art of the sculpture. Okay. That's the tiniest group of people. So you have guys, and I use the term guys, you have people who are obsessive followers of certain sculptors. Okay. Like, if you like Bob Ollie and you collect every Bob Ollie dwarf that Citadel ever put out, and that's your thing, it's weird to me. Like, there's a certain aesthetic style that somebody likes about Bob Ollie sculpture that makes them want to have every single thing the man did. Okay. So I think it's kind of all over the board what draws people in. As a person who's into miniatures and into trying to sell miniatures, I am mostly interested in what people who aren't particularly interested in miniatures don't like about miniatures. What do I, as a miniature seller, have to do to make you, a person who doesn't naturally want miniatures, buy a miniature?
Make it free. Oh, sorry, you said buy.
They are small and difficult to paint.
Yeah, and I get that. I can't change the scale too much. I mean, it's set.
Like, you could charge more for paint and give me free miniatures.
Painted miniatures is a thing, man. It's crazy. Yeah. There's a lot of industry around miniatures, although it's still just I say there's like, it's not a Venn diagram. It's a pyramid chart that has, like gamers, and then the group gets smaller that says gamers that use miniatures, and then of the gamers that use miniatures, the ones that actually paint miniatures, and then of those, the ones who paint them and actually use them in game. You know what I mean? It's like an ever narrowing.
And then like it's Alyssa.
You use the painted ones at the table? What are you, heretic?
Savage. All right, Alyssa, now you.
Yeah, Alyssa.
Yeah, what are your
thoughts? Well, John covered it, and I'm kind of biased in a way because, it's all... So what do you want to get out of a miniature? And if it's purely a placeholder on a table, honestly, then there's some beautiful plastic stands that you can get, and you're good to go. The little acrylic painted things that people are coming up with nowadays, absolutely beautiful. Don't take up any space. Fantastic.
We're recording this.
Well, but I mean, if that's all that you want is that, then cool, go for it. And I'm not going to knock that. But then when you actually start handling a miniature, when you actually start looking at a miniature, the ones that, yes, okay, there are going to be those where it's like, that's my character. And absolutely, that starts the drip, right? Yep. This is where you start to realize the wonder of miniatures. But it's not that much of a further step then to go, this has character. It's not my character, but this has personality.
Oh, boy.
I don't know what that is, but that does not have personality. No.
What the fuck are you talking about? That's Galactus. Come on.
And that's awesome, but it has no personality.
That's a toy, not a miniature. Silly Skinner Green.
It is a toy, and it looks like plastic. No, get it off screen. No, we're talking about art here.
That's a 32 millimeter scale, right?
Yeah, that's not a real scale.
It's enormous.
I want to honestly, seriously, I want to look at a miniature, and I want to handle a miniature that, just like any artwork, it can be a drawing, it can be a map, it can be anything else. It starts to scream personality. Like this stuff over my shoulder here that I'm using as a background. These I got crows, ravens, whatever. They almost look like plague bearers or plague doctors. These guys have huge personality when you hold them. It's like they're little tiny living things. And not all miniatures have that. I have another miniature. I'm not going to name the manufacturer on my shelf behind me. And it's a nice miniature. It's a good sculpt. Has no personality. And I think as long as it's got some personality, it will grab you. And then comes the, I want to put paint on this thing. This thing is going to come to life. It's literally going to start breathing.
But at your house, miniatures can all be ready for that. And in the day they're going to pop paint for them, they'll have gone their whole lives. Never even seen you. I mean, theoretically.
Well, when Alyssa's talking about miniatures with personality, and I'm a bad host, I should have had an example of this. She painted a gaming setting featuring Gary Gygax at a table with a bunch of other players in miniature.
So awesome.
And it's got the books, it's got dice on the table. I think there's, what is it, Gary and 4 players? Is that how many there are?
I think there's 4 players. It's on my YouTube channel, actually. I did post it there for like last Monday or something.
I have the mini. I never went on paint it ever because it's so perfect when you did it. So I'm like, you know what? There are other people for this hobby. I call them painters.
We should give a shout out to Philip Hines from Bear's Head Miniature, who did the sculpt on that gear.
It's great. It's great.
Philip's a good guy.
I think so. What I'm going to do, I'm actually going to paint a GaryCon later this month, and I'm thinking. I think I have like maybe 4 more copies of Gary, and I'm thinking about actually painting them and giving them away at the end of the stream.
That's cool.
Maybe 1 or 2 more dioramas.
I have the Larry Elmore collection of the dioramas that are. He approaches his Caldwell phase of really interesting dressing on the ladies and the dragons. So if we want to give those away and you want to get in trouble, we can do that. We'll do that game hole. Alex will love that.
Yeah, that would be perfect. Zach, that's not okay. You
yes,
can't do that, man.
Yes, I can.
So for me, with the miniatures, it's all about like, is this miniature telling a story to me? And sometimes an individual miniature can do that. Often a collection of miniatures can absolutely do it. But, you know, some of these Raven folk behind me, they're telling stories, you know. They're moving, they're living, they're breathing, and I love that. Most miniatures don't hit the mark.
To expound on that, that's another thing that I think hit me as a miniature lover is there's a set of skeletons. I think Grenadier put them out. There's one that's got a woman over his shoulder. He's hefting a woman. There's another one that's got like a pike, and there's sausages and birds and stuff hanging on it. Oh. And then there's another one that's got a pig and a chest of money. And I remember as a kid, when I bought those minis, I liked them because they had so much character. But I remember the day that I sat and thought about them. I went, well, this is ridiculous. What would a skeleton want? Why does a skeleton need treasure? Why does a skeleton need food? Why does he need a woman? Okay. And in my head, I had kind of wrote this story for them that they had still, they weren't conscious that they were dead, but they still had all of their earthly desires. So they kind of came to be, me, to represent this, 7 deadly sins kind of thing. You had the guy with the female, he was lust and greed and what's the food sin?
Gluttony. I know it. It's gluttony. It's gluttony. I got it.
Gluttony. I was going to say, I should know that one. Well, I've seen Zach's food porn, so gluttony and you and I are gluttonous. So, but the point is that they told a very specific story to me as a young person, and that's like what Alyssa's saying is that when you hit those miniatures that can actually speak to you, that's when it really grabs you. Now, the hard thing to capture is how do you do that when you're sculpting it? How do you know what to do? You know, sometimes people show me artwork for projects they're working on, and I'm like, okay, well, you want me to make a miniature of that, but it's so flat. There's nothing, like, the art is well executed, but it doesn't show anything. It doesn't tell a story. It doesn't.
You just stand there.
Yeah, it's just a person standing there. And so you do your best with those and you move on. But I did a redo of those 3 skeletons digitally. So I did like a modern update.
That's cool.
That will be on our website at some point. But
nice. Well, I'm getting them. They sound awesome.
They moved me that much. So
I mean, a skeleton with a pike and sausages hanging off of it. I think that tells a story.
Well,
I need to
I
talk
think
to
he
that
didn't
dude.
stop to eat before he
We
died.
need to sit down for a few minutes, and I need some backstory on that guy.
Well, yeah, right. I need to
What-
figure out how to do the other 4 deadly sins then. If I got 3 of them,
Oh,
Call Skeeter.
man.
Please call Skeeter. Call
Yeah,
Skeeter because he can help you.
I can help you out with that. I am
skeleton
well
of
versed
sloth is where
in
I'm.
the sins.
You're
And,
well
and an injury. He can go down to 0 HP and be back up in a week, no problem. This happens every year at least twice.
I've done it at conventions.
In front of me. Right in front of me.
Okay, so since John and Alyssa, we are all adults.
Mm-mm.
Now that you have this aspect in your life, you have miniatures in your life. Alyssa, you paint them. John, you sculpt them and sell them. Does this take away from your playing? Or do you have enough time you can do both? Or is it you have to give up role playing to do this thing with miniatures that you also love?
Well, for me, no, it doesn't take away at all. I mean, I'm sure like all of us to a degree here lead very regimented lives and scheduled existences, and I have I have a slot for I am going to paint miniatures.
Do you know
in this time
you
slot.
know who the hosts of this show are? Zach,
You want to know my schedule today? I'll tell you my schedule. I'm done.
Yeah, that's that schedule.
For me, my playing time is one day every other weekend. My painting time is every week at a certain afternoon. If I get more, then that's great. They don't interfere with each other. In fact, they complement each other.
My wife watches each of them too. You stream. I cannot believe my wife watches you guys paint and do maps and everything. She just loves it. Thinks it's the greatest thing ever. Nerves have won.
It's probably relaxing, so she doesn't have to listen to you.
No, she sits there and laughs about it and then types in what makes Alyssa eat jelly beans or something. Then she gets excited every time that happens.
Oh,
Pex
geez.
is a bad man. I told you that.
Yeah. John, you're in a little bit different position having an actual business of selling miniatures, so.
Well, and all I can say is that even with everything going on in my life, I still game 2 times a week. I play on every Tuesday night and most of the day on Saturday.
Man, what the hell is wrong with me? Why is it so hard for me to squeeze a
You know
game
what?
in?
I had to provide a place for it to happen, and then now, like in COVID, in pandemic, we all played by Zoom. But prior to that, I leased another chunk of this building essentially to ensure that we had a place to game all the time, a nice clean area to game. So we moved a fridge in there, painted it all. And so there's an actual gaming room. Like this used to be a game store. And at one point when we closed the game store, all of that became workspace for 3D printers and casting machines. And it's just inventory, stock, all this crap just kind of got pushed into the place that was the game
Black
store.
market, Games Workshop stuff goes over the side. This you put the new stuff in. I get it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So to answer you though, I still play twice a week. I think weirdly when I started doing this as a company, right after I met Ernie Gygax, I think it was maybe when Memorial Tomb was running as a Kickstarter.
Ooh,
I think.
gut punch.
Right. Well, no, I mean, Ernie and I had talked about miniatures, doing some miniatures for that. And I said, well, and I had said to him, well, I'm not sure I really want to, I'm not sure we're in a position to take that on. And I'm glad that we didn't do that at the time. But he said something to me that just struck, and he's like, no matter what, you have to make time. Don't let your business ruin your hobby for you. And so I've really taken that to heart and just said, it's not going to ruin it for me. No matter how mad I get about certain things and how many really long days, 12 hours of casting. I've done some physical labor in my life. 12 hours of standing over a casting machine is brutal.
That sounds like bullshit to me.
It's brutal.
So it looks really hard for 20 minutes. I watched it at Reaper, and I watched him take a bunch and throw them back in. Like, what do you mean? I just worked on those, and the lady would sort through them and get the ones that had extra too much flash, throw away. It's like, this is work. This is not fun. And then that's what I call it. Calling you out on that one, man.
It's. I still have fun with it though.
No,
if I didn't love all the aspect of my end of doing it, you know what I mean? I like designing miniatures. I like the challenge of molding miniatures. I like the challenge of producing miniatures. I like those daily challenges. At the point when I decide I don't like them, maybe there will be no effing cool miniatures, but that's at least, I can tell you that's probably at least 5 years off, because that's about how long it might take me to pay this plastic injection machine. And like, it's a weird situation because it is one of the companies that we cast for is financing it for me. Like, it's not like I had 70 grand just laying around. This guy, who I'll keep his name out of it, just approached me. He's like, hey, look, I want to move my line into plastic. What's it going to take? And I said, well, this is what it's going to take. The machine's in Spain. It costs 70 grand. Voila. He's like, well, what if I financed it and you just purchased it off of me? Okay, that sounds like a great deal. So
somebody's going to end up in a trunk.
Yeah, I was going to say
somewhere.
This. I saw this episode of Sopranos, and it's all going great until they came to take the extra figurines.
Yeah,
you know, around the edges, and then they're like, you know, either your paint or your brains are going to be on that contract, man.
Let's hope not.
Shove the old lead ones down your throat before they throw you out, man.
Make sure you sink.
So I'm going to hit Alyssa up with another question here, and this is going to be one of those ones that you say I don't have to choose. So. But anyway, I want to get your point. With all of the cartography you are doing, which do you prefer to spend your time doing? The cartography or painting miniatures?
Painting miniatures.
Wrong answer.
Zach, you're screwed.
That's the wrong answer. Yeah,
you're never getting that Necropolis map back.
Well, and I think part of it is
I'm going to copy it as the screen.
Well, and I think if I'm gonna expound upon we're saying the word expound a lot today. So, but if I'm gonna elaborate a little bit on this,
somebody opened the thesaurus in another window.
No, but I'm now searching for another word in my head. But no, if I'm going,
I don't speak British, so
if I am going to illuminate the audience a little more as to my no, but seriously, I think it's because right now my mapping is a business, you know, and I've not sat down and just drawn a map almost for the enjoyment's sake for myself in a long time. Like, it's been decades since I just drew a map because I wanted to draw a map. No audience, no commission, no deadline, just me drawing a map. And so I'm actually kind of far removed at this point from the relaxation of drawing tiny little rectangles in a city versus miniature painting. I mean, I actually for a while dabbled in doing miniature painting as commissions, and I instantly didn't like doing it. So nowadays I do miniature painting for fun, period. And I've got a hard wall around there, and I'll paint for friends, and that's it. You know, I'll paint for the joy of miniature painting. Well, mapping, if you think about it, the only mapping I do is because I've promised to do it for someone, typically for some kind of financial recompense. So they're two different worlds for me right now. And I would have to go 5 years in the future, not be mapping anymore for money or for Patreons or for Twitch or for an audience of any type, and just be mapping for me to refine that level of calmness and joy, if that makes sense. Look, Zach's quit. He's gone.
Yeah, Zach's done. You have stabbed him through the heart.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I can look at my maps and a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them, and get huge amount of joy. The same level of joy that I get out of a well-painted miniature, just handling a miniature. And I genuinely mean that. I get the same buzz inside in my soul.
Take your miniature, put on the map, and then you have double.
Well, there's that. But I mean, it's like nowadays I've taken my miniature painting into a different sort of stratosphere in that, I paint just what I want and nothing else. B, I've started doing 54 millimeter and 75 millimeter stuff. I've started doing dioramas.
That's artillery, not miniatures. That's awesome.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I'm painting in a different way. And painting is reserved to like 3 hours on a Friday night, right now. So it's almost become a little refuge. If I flipped that and I was painting on stream and I was painting professionally, that I would flip them, would flip my response.
So you could do 10,000 Roman soldiers in a battle at 2-3 hours a week. That's pretty much how it go.
Well, and I've got to be honest with you, that was a huge highlight of my life when I did the Teutoburg stuff, and I was painting thousands and thousands, or even Watling Street a year before that, and I was painting in 15 millimeter. I sat down every single night and painted and based and flocked, and I had a blast. I look back at that and I have nothing but fond memories of it. And I did it for days and weeks and months every single year for both of those sort of wargaming events, and enjoyed every single moment of it. But I can't do that now. Like John has to go off and actually sort of run the effing cool sort of miniatures line and do his casting and stuff. I got to get to the maps. I got maps to deliver. And so it's just two different worlds.
That is true. It is. You got to make some choices.
I guess my response, Skeet, would be, I wish I could paint more. If I'm going to be fair, I wish I could paint more. That
makes me feel worse about giving you that miniature from Lucid Eye.
I think it makes me feel excited about the suggestion of CB Jack.
Wait a minute. You gave her that miniature from Lucid Eye?
Yes, he did.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Of course he did. Come on.
4 of them.
He's like, just paint this up. And she went,
Well,
if you actually look at the artwork on their site, if you look at what's actually been posted to their product page, it looks like a real nice miniature. It's sultry, it's full bodied, it's got great pose, it's got some dynamics going on in there. I looked at it like several times because I couldn't believe what I was actually holding in my hand.
Me too.
That's why I know that I'm right about what the problem is, and my friends in Indiana are not. They kept saying, well, with under the heat and the pressure, the green might have flattened out. And I said, no, there's a version of this on their website that is a cast version. They didn't paint the green for that artwork on the website. There's a version of this that fits perfect. And the only way that happens is if you over clamp your molds while spinning. It's rubber. So if you put 40 pounds of pressure on it, when you're mastering it, when you're making your first masters, you're casting something, and there's a little bit of shrinkage and a little bit of flattening that can happen if you're not super careful. If you're not careful about it, you could make a lot of flattening happen there. So at that stage, you flattened it a little bit. Then when you make your production mold, where you've got 12 to 14 of these slightly flattened pieces, and you lay them out in a mold and you run it at that same pressure again, you flatten them even more. So like that double flattening, like that column had to have been.
You could surf on her, is what you're saying. Yeah,
it's pretty flat. The column looks, it looks dimensionally proper. It looks round. So in all likelihood, they cast the column up and down in the mold, not flat on its side. So, that's on them. Lucid Eye makes great miniatures. They have a lot of really good miniatures. I've seen a lot of really good casts from them. I'm just surprised that particular piece is that poor. And that wasn't just a fluke.
Yeah. And I've got the picture right there. That is my favorite Frazetta piece. And that's why I got the miniatures. I wasn't going to paint them. Like, Alyssa, can you please do this?
No one ever known.
Yep, I'll do it. So I got an extra one that she can have, and she got it, and it's like a train wreck hit a bus fire.
And you happen to know about everybody that there is to know in tabletop gaming, so you could complain to all of them loudly. That was awesome. That was like a wrecking ball going right through a perfectly comfortable company that week.
Well, the funniest part of that was when Alyssa posted the unboxing and all that stuff.
I know, I saw that.
And Tim DeShane was commenting, and I messaged Sarah Frazetta, and then Deshane commented about that. Oh, look at Skeeter bringing in the big guns.
I tagged
just
her
thought
in
it
it
was
too.
very funny.
At the same time, I was like,
Yeah.
"You got to see this."
No, and that's the kind of thing. If I had a property and somebody was licensing it to make, miniatures or something of it, and it was not working out, and people were pissed about it, I would want to know.
You absolutely would, right?
He's done it.
I have.
Then let me ask you. So, John, let me ask you a question about process here. Because one thing that I'm always a little bit amazed about with this particular miniature is, like, it came to light very quickly, even with no gluing or anything like that. That clearly this princess has been squished, and she does not fit on the steps. You can see that just by putting her on them. And to me, as the laywoman, so to speak, not understanding the process, I sit here thinking, shouldn't quality control have caught this? Is there such a thing?
Well, okay, and I can tell you what our quality control process is with multi-part miniatures. Our rejection is directly based on whether they will actually fit together. So what happens, the first thing we do, like the multi-part miniatures, they go through, we look for soft fill where maybe a part didn't get filled all the way, for whatever reason. We reject on soft fill, we reject on flashing, excessive mold shift, all the usual eye-catching things. So then you're down to the bins of pieces, like 200 of body part 1, 200 of body part 2, 200 of the head or whatever. And then what happens before they go in a bag is once they pass through primary QC, they get set aside as a set.
Tracking kit. All right.
And if they do not fit together, they don't go into the bag. If you can't find them. So when we ship a miniature, it's test fitted all the way before it even goes into the packaging. And so, I can't speak for what other people do. I don't know what
Not that
does. Obviously, in that case, they didn't. But there again, I don't know enough about Lucid Eye's operation, whether they're quote unquote a garage operation or if they're, having a Frazetta license, you would think that they would have been that stuff was vetted to the point that it wasn't just a garage operation. I don't know whether they are.
Well,
or not.
The thing that makes
I
me
like
nervous,
when you say that.
the thing that makes me nervous is that they have other sculpts as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I've looked at some of the other ones and I'm like,
I've seen paint jobs on some of the other Frazetta pieces they've done by other painters that look great. Yeah. I've never seen anybody paint that particular piece that we're talking about. And so Alyssa's the first person I've seen with one in her hands that was getting ready to be painted.
She had two, she would have tossed it.
I wonder if
I've got 4 now, guys, just to be clear.
You can juggle them.
I've got 4 of them now, and they're all the same, including the ones where we cast them and they're worse, if anything.
You're a bombard like the old 15th century gun. You drop the lead in there and boom, shoot at France. It'd be awesome.
Having said all that about QC, I will say that things just get through sometimes also, but having 4 of them that don't fit that's not the oops, they slipped. If I'm telling you right now, if somebody sent me a thing that said, look, dude, these things fit terrible. All right. I would go cast that day the most perfect replacement. Because I'm never wanting somebody to come at me twice with the same problem. So like the Gary Con dragons, remember I told you how the bodies didn't fit? They just didn't really fit. There was a pretty good gap between the front half and the back half. Not pointing the finger of blame, but that wasn't really my fault.
That was Zach's fault. I know.
We'll blame it on Zach.
It's usually Zach's fault.
With miniatures, sure, why not? I can add to my list.
I didn't do the production casting on those, and so the error is what it is. It wasn't.
I did. It was me. I did.
I gotta be honest with you, though, John, and not blowing smoke up your ass or anything here, but I've done 2 Gary Con dragons now, and like they were both pretty damn good. If anything, I had more problem with the tail on one of them than I ever did on the body. The body and the legs fitting into the body and the neck.
It's weird. The first
flawless, man, just flawless. I love them.
The first one you had, though, I sent you out of the master molds. I think I sent you, Brian Steele. I don't remember who else got them out of the master molds. So those were shipped separate. So those are different than the ones that they actually sold at the convention. And so,
Peter, did you get one? Did you get one of the special ones from him?
Dude, I'm just surprised they even came on this show. I don't get shit from anybody.
oh, well, you know what? You keep deleting me as a Facebook friend. And
I know that one. That one's on
boom, mic drop.
Yep.
And I've got some Egyptian princess miniatures I'll send you.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Peter,
I don't know what I'm going to do.
I've got some spares.
Peter, if you want the entire Court of the Sultana set, to parade around in.
Well, yeah.
He'll put it on Facebook and talk about how mad he is.
Zach's going to get me one of those.
Well, it's not like they cost me all that much to make. If you want things,
oh yeah,
as long as you're.
I heard that song and dance when I made miniatures, and you know what? By the time you get to that point, you're already exhausted and broke. That's how it works.
Well, that's true. The downside to making miniatures without that's why I started doing this. Once I really got going, I'm like, well, the only way I can actually make any money is if I own all the equipment, control the entire process, start to finish.
Right.
I got to teach myself how to sculpt. I can't be paying, anywhere from $400 to $1,000 every miniature. I'll never make any money that way. So,
that seems cheap still. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, sculptors don't get paid that much. But
the production molds and all the rest of the process, clamshells. I mean, those cost me money.
Clamshells. That's why we don't do clamshell packaging for shipping. And the reason is it looks better as a presentation, but it takes up more room for shipping because you have a standard thickness. And then you're also paying money for the clamshell that they're going to throw away.
So you use the drug bags, like the dime bags that people use. You put
that's what we do. That's what we do.
Zach.
Little poly bags.
I went to Joann's Fabric and bought 2,000 of those one day and realized after I left why they wanted to not talk to me ever, because I had 2,000 little bags.
Because you seem like
crack
the type.
dealer.
Yeah. Okay. I feel horrible for having to cut anybody off or cut this short, but we're right up against an hour, and I have been encouraged to talk about Frog God Game Day. It's April 9th to 11th on the Frog Discord directly in 3 minutes, where Zach and I are supposed to be. They
can't start without us, dude.
They are giving away a raffle, or they are having.
They're giving away an actual raffle.
You don't want to win. I'm just going to tell you right now.
Raffling the opportunity to be in a game with Zach Glazer and or Skeeter Green.
I'm a one-trick pony.
I cannot even imagine how horrible this is going to go.
The sad part,
nobody who even tries.
Everybody
to
has a great time.
Raffle.
Everybody has a great time in my game. I'm a one-trick pony. I'm still doing Whisper and Venom. And that was ages ago, and I have a great time doing it. And then my father said, "What are you doing?" I'm running a game. People pay to be in a game. But yeah, it's Frog God Game Day is a lot of fun. You should all come play.
All right, as we wrap up, John Popson, give us your last words, sir.
See y'all in the funny pages.
That's actually pretty good. Are you going to be at Gamehole?
Gamehole's a weird thing, only in that I'm just saying I've never been there, and the only way I really can justify going is as a vendor. I've been on the vendor waiting list every year that they've had it, and have never.
Pretty clean this time. This is your chance.
Might be my chance. So maybe I'll have to hit that up and see if they've got any openings for vending. Problem is that it's as much as I love to go in game, I have to still be able to justify it. Yeah.
I got a vendor there too. I know how you feel. It's a nice con. It really is nice.
Yeah, the pictures look great. It looks like a lot of fun, but cons are tough for me anyway.
Understood. You got a lot of product that takes up space.
Yeah,
I feel for you. Books are heavy too. So I'm with you.
They're heavy.
Alyssa, what's on the con schedule?
Well, Gary Khan, 2 painting sessions, one on the Friday, one on the Saturday, both of which at the end of the session, I'll give away the miniature that I'm painting. Saturday, little mapping panel, hopefully with Luke and Ernie talking about the Gaxmore map.
And Thursday, you're going to be in the small publisher seminar.
Oh yeah, and Thursday there's
We're gonna talk to that?
publisher thing going on.
They found new suckers, huh? Right on.
God. No respect. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to Alyssa.
Thank you, everybody.
John, you have
Thank
brought
you.
some.
Where'd you get
class.
such good guests? Where'd you find such good guests?
Well, I didn't think you were even going to be here, so I had to get somebody to carry the show.
We had to.
Well, thank God.
Can't.
Well, I'm tired. I never carried in the first place. I was just exhausted watching you. And thank you, everybody, and thank you two very much. John, it's nice to meet you. I've seen you around, but now I know.
Thank you to everyone in the chat. Effing Cool Miniatures, Alyssa Fadden on the YouTubes. We'll see you all later. Thank you for tuning in. See you all later. Thank you for tuning in.